Well, I would like to talk out of the book of Philemon one more time before we leave it and go on to something else. And I'd like the framework to be how we talk to other people and how we address issues, especially in the social media age. If you ever want proof of what the Bible says, that people are sinners, just read a thread sometimes on social media, especially over a news story or on a controversial issue, and you will hear people say just absolutely vicious things about one another, all the while claiming about themselves, of course, that they love people and they respect people and all that. They just don't respect these particular people they're talking to. But we've all probably been guilty of that. So how do you talk to people about what are arguably controversial issues or just struggles and everything? And I think Philemon, among other things, is just a great study in that. That's one of the things that surfaced for me as I've read through it. I thought, it's amazing. And what we've said is that Philemon is spiritual maturity on display. You're listening to Paul as an old man who's got a ton of experience. He's seen the Lord. He's been to the third heaven. He's done all these things. And this is how he addresses the issue of slavery, which again was a part of the fundamental fabric of the economy of the Roman Empire. That doesn't make it right. It just means they would have been surrounded by it completely. And you can bet that Paul wouldn't have agreed with it, wouldn't have liked with it, wouldn't have liked it. As he went to win the Gentiles to Christ, he would have been confronted by the issue over and over and over again and had to figure out how to navigate them through a higher version of this. And so the book of Philemon is a study in how to address people. And this includes your children. This includes just people you may work with. But there's a few principles that rise to the surface I just want to point out that kind of rose for me. Number one, you can tell that Paul genuinely cares about Philemon. He tells him he prays for him. He cares about him to the point of commending him specifically. That's another thing. He can say, hey, I've been praying for you. He names his wife, probably his son. He says, and he calls him a heart refresher. He is someone who has refreshed the hearts of the saints. And later on in the letter, he says, refresh my heart. That's what you're good at. Philemon, you do that. You have to understand. I don't know what Philemon did to do that stuff, but I know we all have people like that in our lives that are just the kind of people when we're around them, our hearts get larger and go higher rather than smaller and lower. And we all know the difference. And so heart refreshing is something that he points out that he does. He says very authentically, he talks to him, he said, this is exactly what I'm doing. So he's very honest about what he wants. He's very forthright about that. He spells it out. But then he says, hey, listen, he appeals to him in love and towards love. He said, first of all, I can order you to do this. Paul was very much about that. As an apostle from Christ, he could say, Philemon, here's the deal. Here's what you're going to do. Listen up. You're going to sit right there, and you're going to do what I tell you to do. But he says, I decided not to do that. I'm appealing to you on the basis of love. I want you to do something. Now, he does dig in later, which is probably my favorite line in the letter. He says, not to mention you owe me your very life, your very self. Not to mention, but I am going to mention it that way. I love the fact that he's shrewd that way, and he just kind of says, listen, I'm appealing you in love, but remember, put it in context, just remember some things here. So that's kind of a nice little way to put it. But he doesn't put it in a mean tone. He doesn't say it as a jerk. He just says, I love you, you can tell. He talks about his care for Onesimus. He talks about where he's coming from. Listen, you got to understand that I love this guy. And I care about him. As a matter of fact, I care about him so much. Here's another thing he does. I want you to, if you've got a problem with him, charge it to me. If he owes you something, charge it to me. In other words, I'm going to put myself not only in your place, but I'm going to put myself in Onesimus' place. I'm throwing myself so in the middle of this that I'm living inside it. That's pretty phenomenal when it comes to he's not just addressing an issue in an abstraction. And finally, he's brief. He doesn't go on and on and on berating him about things or going into a long discussion about what it is. His letter is brief. It's a very, very short letter, but it ended up having a huge impact on the ancient world. So I hope we can learn some of those things about how to approach issues. I know the book of Philemon inspired me to a higher vision, which in the end, that's exactly what Paul did. Paul uses his words to take Philemon from one place to the other. He calls him to a higher vision, which is ultimately what the letter was really all about. There's a higher vision of life. And I would just encourage us that as we learn from the scriptures, that what I was challenged by was, am I calling people to a higher vision of life? In a way, appealing to them in love and respecting who they are and commending what they do right and well, but throwing myself in the middle of things, but calling them to a higher vision of life. Kind of wonder about that, because that really comes out very strongly in the book of Philemon, and I hope you learn that. Okay, well, the next time we are in, and this is our last one, we are in the book of Jude. It's our next short book, the book of Jude. It's very different from the others. It has a different kind of tone, but I would encourage you to go ahead and start getting in that. Maybe read the book of Philemon one more time to kind of get that approach to how to talk to people down in your heart, but then shift over, and the next time we get together, we'll be looking at the background and starting to set the framework for how to understand the book of Jude. Hope you enjoy it.